October 1st is the official kickoff to chip usage in the U.S. A recent study by Visa shows that 89% of consumers are aware of chip cards, but only 30% have actually used one. Also, with more than 141 million cards, the U.S. now has more chip cards issued than any other country in the world. So how does it all work? Stephanie Erickson, Vice President of Risk Products at Visa, is joining us now to tell us. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, so this is a big time of year for you guys, for Visa, just one of the many. Talk about these chip cards and what do you think people really need to understand as we get ready to go through this massive transition?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, many people already have a chip card. The banks have been reissuing their cards as chip for the last few months, but we know it does take several years for every card to be reissued with a chip on them and for every merchant location to be enabled to read the chip. But the great thing about moving to chip technology is it's very effective at driving down counterfeit fraud, which is roughly 2/3 of the fraud that we see in stores today. So it's going to bring a lot more security to the payments that we do every day.
Oh, that is so good to hear. Something needed to be done. So tell me, if you already had it, because I had a card that I feel like has had a chip in it for a while, but it was never used. Does that still need to be updated, or what do we do with our old cards?
So if you have an old card that doesn't yet have a chip on it, that's okay. You can still use the MagStripe on your card. Consumers always have zero fraud liability protection, but more frequently as we go forward, the terminals are going to start to be upgraded to read the chip on the card. They can still read the MagStripe, and issuers are going to start replacing the cards that you have in your wallet. Typically when your current card expires is when you'll be getting a replacement that's now a chip card. So it's going to take a few years for all the cards to turn over and all of the merchant terminals to become upgraded. But we're going to see more frequently, particularly going into this holiday season, that chip transactions are going to become a lot more part of the way that we pay.
And what is it about the chip that's going to be able to hopefully take down fraud in this country? Because that is a huge issue that I think almost everybody has dealt with at some point.
Yeah, the great thing about chip technology is it's generating a unique one-time code that changes with each transaction, and that code cannot be used by criminals to create a counterfeit card or do any counterfeit fraud. So it makes the data in merchant systems a lot less attractive for criminals to try to break in and steal because they can't do any counterfeit fraud with it. And consumers, as I mentioned, are always protected, but it's also going to bring a lot more confidence in our payment security that as they move forward, they don't have to worry about their data being compromised.
Okay. Now let's talk about the stores before we let you go too, because I know, gas station, everybody's going to be going towards this. Do they have a certain timeline on when they get their machines updated, or when can we see some changes and for this really to be kind of across the board?
Yeah, so merchants typically take about 2 or 3 years after the kickoff to get to 60 or 70% of all the transactions being chip transactions, and it does typically take about 4 or 5 years to get to greater than 90%. So what we're going to see is many merchant locations, particularly the large electronics stores and luxury good retailers where the counterfeit fraud tends to be happening, those locations will be converting first, and then more and more locations will be converting as we move forward.
Okay. Now, if anyone has any questions, do you contact your bank? Do you contact Visa? What do you do? Where do you go to get your questions answered?
There's a lot of great information on visachip.com for both consumers and small businesses, and if a consumer wants to know when their current card is going to be reissued as chip, they can always call their bank to find out.
All right, Stephanie, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Great. Thanks a lot, Carly.
We, of course, will put more